The concept is, with AI mainly, with AI you can get 80% of the functionality of your swanky SaaS platform at 90% less cost. And so for a lot of use cases, that is actually quite good enough. But to get from 80% functionality to 100% functionality, maybe getting AI in the first place would just take you backwards and will cost you more to close that gap and to not even have bothered with it in the first place. So you need a bit of judgment.
For 20 years, we built software kind of backwards. We started with the assumption that every edge case needed handling, every scenario needed coverage, every possibility needed code. The result? Enterprise software that costs millions and takes years to build and is unused because it's too complex. Alan's 80-90 rule isn't about accepting mediocrity. It's about recognizing that most business problems don't need 100% solutions. They need 80% solutions delivered in weeks, not years. Think about it. A procurement team managing supplier pricing doesn't need perfect accuracy on every widget component. They need directionality, correct insights that they can act on today. That's where the economic inversion is. When good enough delivered fast beats perfect delivered never.
The engineer who's working on that, he came up with a lovely phrase that I'll never forget. He said, trying to use language models to do maths, it's like trying to shoot birds with a trebuchet. Sometimes it might work, but it's probably a bit of a waste of time. There are much simpler ways of solving those sorts of problems. And I think that's part of the issue we have today, is that there's so much hype about AI that people assume that you can just plug it into anything and it will magically solve everything for you, which is absolutely not the case. But then the downside of the older way means that you end up with these certainly the enterprise software that I'm familiar with, you end up with this hopelessly over-engineered stuff that covers every potential use case, which then becomes unusable, so people don't use it. But then you have all these adoption issues with the software. So where's the balance? Is there a use case where 80% of the functionality is going to achieve the objective that you have? And for a lot of cases, it will.
Error tolerance isn't a technical decision. It's a business decision. Alan's example is perfect. You can't be 80% accurate on contract expiry dates, but for pricing trends, for supplier categorization, for RFP summarization, 80% accuracy that ships tomorrow beats 100% accuracy that ships next year. The skill isn't in building perfect systems. It's in identifying which problems can be tolerated and which problems need accuracy. A procurement team comparing this year's chair prices to last year's doesn't need atomic level component analysis. They need to know if they're being overcharged. That's a fundamentally different problem that AI solves brilliantly at 80%.
$400 and $4,000 are very different things. So you can't use something that thinks that they're similar to solve those sorts of problems. There will be plenty of cases where it won't, obviously. If you can't be 80% accurate on when your contract expires. But I don't need to know the makeup of every single piece of widget in my chair that I'm buying to know roughly our chair's more expensive than this year than last year. So, for example, yesterday I was talking to one of our guys who wants a particular feature. So in the olden days, you'd have written it down on a whiteboard, and then you'd have got someone to do some figures, and then you'd have built a prototype, then you'd realize that wasn't really what you wanted, because now you can click it, it does not, and then you go back and you do 2 or 3 iterations. Anyway, so he spent 2 hours vibe coding something, which obviously it's not a functional piece of software that you could release to someone, but it's good enough that you can explain, okay, well, if you press on this stuff, I want it to do roughly this kind of feature.
The hardest part isn't the technology, it's the psychology. We've trained a generation of developers and product managers to believe that shipping anything less than perfect is a failure. But here's the myth. If you can deliver 80% functionality in 2 weeks instead of 100% functionality in 6 months, you've created 5.5 months worth of value. Even if users need workaround for that missing 20%, they're already getting value while your competitors are still in sprint planning. This isn't about lowering standards. It's about understanding that in most business contexts, speed to value trumps perfection.
The mobile problem, right? So if you think of a mobile phone, an invoice says mobile phone, you know what that is, it's a phone. If you've got an invoice that says mobile app development, you know what that is. It's not a mobile phone. It's something completely different, but it's got the same word in. Or if you've got an invoice that says a mobile billboard, that's nothing to do with tech at all, right? It's an advertising thing. So we found that by bringing language models in, we could get accuracies in the high 90s, which is pretty cool. without much human intervention. The price of this item had gone up by 28%, and the underlying index had gone up 14% over the same period of time. So it doesn't give you the whole story, but it gives you something that gives you some enough information that you can then go and have a conversation with your supplier. Oh, far be it for me to suggest that suppliers might be a bit cheeky, but if every time the index goes up, the price goes up. Every time the index goes down, I bet you the price stays where it was.
The 80/90 revolution isn't coming, it's here. Whilst your competitors chase perfect solutions, you can ship working software. Whilst they debate edge cases, you can iterate based on real user feedback. The question isn't whether AI can handle every scenario perfectly. It can't. It's whether your business can afford to wait for perfection whilst good enough is available today. Welcome to the new default, where 80% functionality at 90% less cost isn't a compromise, it's an advantage.